Travis Kriens, Landon, Dierks, Marcus Traxler back. Another edition of our podcast is focused on a lot of high school football throughout the season. We now transition to a little bit of basketball, also talking some SDSU and USD playoff football from the weekend. So kind of a lot to get to as winter sports starting to kick off. We'll also touch on the Mitchell Kernels, Minnesota Vikings, NFL, and college football playoffs. So a lot to digest here after a couple weeks off. And gentlemen, kind of a couple weeks to kind of regroup. You get wrestling, gymnastics, and a lot of basketball games have already started here with high school, but we're kind of back in the thick of it now.
Travis, let me be the last.
Thank you.
To wish you a happy Thanksgiving. And yes, we're in this middle season here where you got college basketball firing up, college football still running. Here locally, you got DWU going on. You get going with the prep sports like you were talking about. So a lot of different irons in the fire, and we're just kind of feeling out what the schedule is going to look like. And of course, the end of the month, you've got all kinds of stuff. Hoop City Classic still ahead, other basketball classics. So yeah, there's never really a slow time of the schedule. I know the summer is kind of the obvious one, but there's always stuff going on.
And Landon here as well. We got SDSU football. We'll start there. Again, an impressive showing versus Montana. Their first playoff game had not much trouble with the Grizzlies. 35-18 your final. It was 35-3 there early in the fourth quarter as the Montana tacks on a couple of late touchdowns. But Marcus, I think things kind of went as you would expect. They've got a rematch with Incarnate Word coming up this week. And, I would say SDSU's a lot better than they were a couple months ago when they played Incarnate Word early September in their home opener. So, probably expect a similar 3-4 touchdown margin there. But, SDSU kind of rolling right now.
Yeah, we're seeing, defensively, there were a couple late touchdowns in that game, but they're as sharp as they've been. They probably have the best defense right now, maybe them and Montana State, the way things have been going in the playoffs. And, they're running the ball pretty effectively. The passing game looked good. Griffin Willie had his best game of the season against Montana. So a lot of these elements kind of working together, and I think, they're one of the more dangerous teams left in the bracket. There's only 8 teams, but with the pedigree and the way they're playing, it's interesting, and I think it's going to be, unless there's some sort of stunner, they're going to run into North Dakota State in a week, and that, of course, will be a slugfest, but there's certainly a really good chance SDSU's going back to Frisco.
Good, Landon. That Incarnate Word game, they kind of struggled early in that game, pulled away in the second half, and they had struggled against Oklahoma State the week before, and there were some questions coming into the season about, really both sides of the ball for SDSU and, kind of especially on that defense, how they would respond. And they've been, really, really good ever since that first half versus Incarnate Word. They've not given up much on the defensive end. And there were a couple surprises, USD won and North Dakota State won, but they didn't definitely not win as comfortably as the Jackrabbits did on Saturday.
Yeah, I really think the offense in that first Incarnate Word game, I think, was probably the best early season showing from that offense. Obviously, they had to find their footing as the season has gone on, and looks like they're on a pretty good rhythm right now. But all the way through, really, I think the defense has been fine. You got to give some credit to Incarnate Word. They have some really talented pass catchers. I believe Woltall is the last name, and then Alexander, who was a transfer from that Albany team that went to Brookings in the semifinals last year. Both of those guys are very talented. I think both of them have double-digit receiving touchdowns on the season. And then, of course, I came away from that game. If there was one player on the whole field I was impressed with most, it was Zach Calzada. That kid can throw it around, the quarterback for Incarnate Word. So, it's not going to be easy. Excuse me. It's not going to be easy, I don't think, for the Jacks to just walk into the semifinals, but they are the better team, and they should handle business on Saturday, I would assume.
And the Word, as I like to call them, they kind of struggled with, a Villanova team 13-6. Incarnate Word ekes out a win there.
Box score is a little weird for that game. If you look at the total offense, I think Incarnate Word outgained them 450-150 and won by 7 points.
Yeah, it seemed like the game was played more like Villanova would want because they are more of a defensive team historically, and Incarnate Word, for whatever reason, was not able to finish drives with touchdowns. So definitely looking to see, what sort of Incarnate Word team shows up in Brookings. And if it's not the high-flying offensive one, they're not going to win the game.
An 11 a.m. starts?
Yes.
Was it noon, was it not? And that changed to 11 a.m.?
Noon Eastern. Yeah.
Noon Eastern. So 11 a.m. start, and ESPN Plus, and also
the big ESPN,
the mothership
right after College Game Day. I assume is going to be at Army Navy. So SDSU gets that time slot. They've had it a couple times now, I believe, in the postseason. I think last year when they played Villanova, and a couple years back against Holy Cross as well. So good notoriety there. All the games, I mean, I guess except USD's the ESPN Plus game this week, but the other three all have good linear time slots. So.
Yeah, early start, 11 a.m., 9 a.m., pregame on KORN News Radio here in Mitchell. And then speaking of the Coyotes, they pull away a very close game against Tarleton State there. A couple scores in the fourth quarter to win by 2 scores. But they probably have the toughest matchup versus UC Davis. I don't know what the point spread is. Would you say UC Davis
I saw 6.5 was open.
For UC Davis?
No, for USD.
USD. I think UC Davis wins this game on the road. How do you see? I mean, they've got the one loss versus Montana State. That's the only FCS team they've lost to this season. I think a pretty tough test here for the Coyotes, who got off to a really bad start last week.
Yeah, UC Davis offensively has been very solid all year, and historically has been a good defensive team. So I think their game to potentially give USD all they can handle. Lan Larison, the star player offensively for UC Davis. I know there was a contingent that wanted to see him among the final 3 for the Walter Payton Award. He didn't make it, but really, really tough player to stop. So, USD has had the habit of some slow starts this year in a few games, and Tarleton State gave them all they could handle the other day. It was kind of a blow-for-blow game, and to USD's credit, they were able to get turnovers in the second half, and they were able to keep pace offensively, which I was probably more concerned if you were to present this situation to me before the game about them keeping pace offensively. So the fact they were able to kind of win a little bit of a shootout is a good sign. But I come back to these other teams that are going to come to Vermilion, they're going to be eager to play in a dome. Yeah. And I think UC Davis is going to be the same way of like, we get, relatively good weather conditions in a dome, and we'll take our chances against the Coyotes.
Did either of you get to see any of that game?
I just saw some of the highlights. Yeah.
That offense that Tarleton State runs is weird.
Yeah.
The slow mesh.
RPO, yeah.
They get the snap and they just basically stand there for like 3 seconds.
They must be the FCS version of Wake Forest, because Wake Forest does the same thing. So.
It's one of the most bizarre things I've ever seen on a football field, but it certainly worked for them for a lot of Saturday. I don't know if that, is partially to blame. Just you don't see that very often. So, what I think is a really quality defense for the Coyotes was maybe caught a couple of times. It certainly is a little bit interesting that they didn't have a lead until the fourth quarter. That doesn't inspire a ton of confidence, especially the way then on the flip side, UC Davis. I mean, I thought maybe they could have been right for the picking against Illinois State, and they blew the doors off Illinois State. So they're definitely going to be an interesting one down in Vermilion this weekend.
All top 8 seeds advance. So you've got SDSU as a 3, Incarnate Word as a 6, USD the 4 seed, taking on number 5 UC Davis. North Dakota State struggled for a half versus Abilene Christian. Ended up putting up 51 points there in a 20-point victory. So they've got Mercer coming up 2:30 Central Time. Then Montana State and Idaho. That should be a fun little matchup coming up at Friday night at 8 p.m. So I guess I got some questions about the USD game, but I think Montana State, SDSU should advance.
My lock of the week for this week is North Dakota State is going to pound Mercer after how they had a bad game, relatively so, against Abilene Christian. They're going to come out of the gate.
It's going to be It's going to be merciless. It's going to. I don't wish it upon Mercer, but it feels destined to happen.
Yeah. Well, that's your FCS quarterfinals. We'll get to the college football playoff, the 12-team version coming up here shortly. But staying with SDSU, you've got the women going through a pretty good stretch right now. You kind of see where they rack up these impressive non-conference victories. You can add Oregon to the list, a really good showing versus Duke there last month, only losing by 4 against what's now a top 10 team. They've got a win versus Creighton, a win versus Wisconsin, which is probably more name recognition rather than a real quality team. But they've got Dakota.
Ball State's receiving votes, and
Ball State was a good one on the road.
And SDSU was down against them and rallied in the fourth quarter. They've done that a few times here.
Theme,
Montana over the weekend, they did that against them as well. So
Rice.
So you don't want to make that a habit, but they kind of are, and it's worked out to that point. But when they played Ball State was the number 3 mid-major in the country. SDSU went from 8-1 not long after that.
Yeah.
So I don't know what exactly was going on with the mid-major poll there, but SDSU right up at the top again.
You expect them to lose at Texas. Texas is a top 5 team. That's coming up in a couple of weeks on a Sunday, December 22nd. Tough matchup versus Northern Iowa this Saturday. They do play Dakota Wesleyan on Wednesday. So if they can get through this stretch here with only 3 non-conference losses, you expect them to likely go undefeated again in the Summit League. You'd have a loss versus Georgia Tech. You'd have a loss versus Texas, and you'd have a loss versus Duke. 2 of your losses would be against top 10 teams. Then you're looking at, they're going to be that 8-9 seed conversation. We'll see how, all the metrics pull out here. But, 3 losses in the non-conference, not too bad.
Well, the other thing is, and maybe, it feels almost criminal to think this far ahead, but it feels like they bought themselves a lifeline too. I mean, when you have a couple of ranked wins and stuff like this, I think they could probably, I know they're heavy favorites to win the Summit League, and they probably should, but do they have to win it, the tournament?
Probably not. No,
at this point, I think they probably
No.
get the benefit of the doubt and still get into the tournament regardless. They're not going to rest on that, of course, but they've had a really impressive non-conference from my point of view.
As we speak on December 9, SDSU 42nd in the net, up 2 spots from where they were the day before.
It's probably not, things will settle. They still got Texas to boost that a little bit. Northern Iowa should be good, but that's, not going to get any higher, probably not going to be any higher than the low to mid 40s.
Texas is 4, Duke is 10. So Georgia Tech's 23.
Yeah.
Katie Vasika's kind of been, the key freshman. They've got that freshman class, and they've got her and Emily Fox, who have contributed quite a bit, the others with redshirt years, but Katie Vasika maybe, a freshman candidate. And she's really come on and she has contributed in a big way and got a lot of minutes very early on. So she's kind of a step above, and maybe we talked about that maybe back in the spring. I think you said she was the one you thought she would be the best out of this class, and that seems to be true in the first month.
I think she was certainly the most college ready right out of the gate, and that's kind of proven itself. I think it was that Ball State game. She had a really, really big game, and it was a big reason they won that one. And shout out to Emily Fox, the local kid. Had 4 threes over the weekend. That's a pretty big performance. I've been really impressed with. Obviously, they're only playing the 2 freshmen, but both of them have stepped right into a veteran team and don't look out of place, I don't think.
I don't know. It's probably not going to happen, but if anybody's ever going to have a case to sweep all of these awards in a conference, SDSU's going to have a great chance because Brooklyn Meyer should be the player of the year. Katie Vasika should be the freshman of the year. They have a newcomer of the year. Maybe SDSU won't get that, but
Coach of the year.
Coach of the year should be probably automatic. So, yeah, it's kind of interesting how SDSU's in line to run the table there.
Yeah. And then you have the SDSU men. What were they? Were they second preseason at Kansas City?
Yes.
SDSU men.
Yep.
And so we'll see how that develops. But SDSU men probably better than people thought they would be. They're 8-3. They've had a couple of close losses. 1-point loss to Boise State. Didn't play very well out in Rapid City last month versus Northern Colorado. That's probably the one disappointment. But Northern Colorado, not a bad team. They've had close wins. They beat Long Beach State by 1. They also have, they end their non-conference coming up here with Alabama at the end of the month, and they've got Nevada and Colorado this week. So a tough stretch out in the mountains this week for SDSU. But so far, they're probably better than people thought.
And they had this Big Sky Summit Challenge, so they played at Montana, and they hosted Eastern Washington. Landon and I each stayed and watched them against Eastern Washington. They didn't have Oscar Clough against Montana. They had him against Eastern Washington.
Difference.
Huge difference. What an incredible player.
That having set 6'11" guy down, man, he's so impressive.
Yeah. The fact that I know they had all these transfers that they had kind of announced, and I think SDSU coaches kind of dropped the hint like, hey, Oscar Clough's going to be an impact guy, and he has turned out to be that. And his impact, his efficiency underneath the basket, really good. So they have to hope he stays healthy. But other than that, I would expect him to be the Summit League Player of the Year.
Yes.
The way this is going. So and then all the other young guys that are playing and they're all making an impact. I'm eager to see where this team is when they get to Sioux Falls. And I should point out, because we talked about it, I think a couple weeks ago, Matthew Morris has had a few really good games in a row here. So that's nice to see.
Yeah, just on the Clough note, from my point of view, what more can you ask? He's
give
a
me
big dude.
Clough Notes version.
Yeah, that's right.
Scoring 20 points a game. He's the fourth.
Double every time out.
He's a 4th leading rebounder in the country. if you just, I don't know if that's exactly what they expected. I think he's maybe overperforming just a little, but I mean, certainly we got to listen to Hendo in the post game conference on Saturday. He's really impressed with the big guy.
And I would just point out, we talk all this about the transfer portal, and he went from Washington State to SDSU. And, I guess in theory that maybe sounds like a downgrade, but SDSU's, I mean, they're going to be a top 75 team probably in the net or whatever it might be. And so he probably came to SDSU knowing, okay, I can make an impact and jump in here, and he certainly has. So
you look at Zeke Mayo and William Kyle III, the two best players last year, and they both leave for UCLA and Kansas. And now your 1-2 punches, I mean, Oscar Clough for sure, and then probably Joe Seiler is filled in there, and he probably would not be getting as many minutes if Zeke Mayo had stuck around. Oscar Clough and Joe Seiler, they're giving you more than Zeke Mayo and William Kyle III would have, which nobody would have expected. And, we saw those guys this year. Zeke Mayo, you go to Kansas, I suppose. William Kyle III probably made a bad choice. You're going to UCLA, you're not playing much, you're not doing much. You're averaging 4 points a game. So sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. But that combo right there, I don't think those, Zeke Mayo and William Kyle, would they be averaging 30 points and 15 rebounds a game? Maybe they wouldn't be doing much better than that. So I don't think you're losing much. And, Joe Seiler's going to be around for a while. So you didn't lose as much as probably people thought.
It's an interesting way of looking at it. I hadn't really thought about that, and I think it's a fair point.
Because does Oscar Clough come here if William Kyle does he still?
Probably not, no.
That's a need that you would not have needed to fill.
What you're saying about the consistency of Clough night in and night out definitely makes a difference. That's a part where it's come through. I mean, Zeke Mayo, you can't argue. He's literally playing in the starting lineup for Kansas, like that, and that has part of that.
And he's from there's just
part of that
kismet there.
And part of that was injuries have kind of opened up a little bit more of an opportunity, even for him at Kansas. I watched some of that UCLA-Oregon game on Sunday night, and where they had the bank in 3 and UCLA won. Mick Cronin seems like he doesn't like all of his players all the time, and I don't know if that's a situation happening out for William Kyle, but it's going to be a lot harder to crack the lineup at UCLA, where I don't know their roster like the back of my hand, but he's not the only 6'10" guy they probably have. They probably have a couple, and so it just becomes a lot more complicated, whereas at SDSU, you're a bigger fish in a smaller pond for sure.
You just never know when you go somewhere. Baylor Shireman, it worked wonderfully for him. He was probably a top 20 player in the country. He's gets drafted by the Celtics. It couldn't have gone any better for him. Other guy, David Jenkins Jr. didn't work so hot for him. He was coach moving all around with Otzelberger, and you end up at the end of the bench versus Purdue.
You've talked about it, Caleb Grill, who was supposed to come to SDSU, and he's jumped around. He's at Missouri now, but these things come and go, and
So SDSU basketball, good as always. Again, coverage on KORN here throughout the week, throughout the season.
Is it appropriate if I fire off my hot take right now?
Also, I was gonna lead into it like this. The bracket's been announced. Controversy, perhaps debate. A team that got in that had not a good resume. Should they have gotten in? We're talking about SDSU volleyball, of course. No good win. Did I get you there? Did I get you? I think you figured it out. SDSU volleyball. I was surprised. I think you were probably surprised that they got an at-large last week to the NCAA tournament. A 27-2 team that loses in 5 sets to USD last week. They get in. Their net ranking, RPI, whatever they use for volleyball, was pretty good at around 30, 35, that range. But strength of schedule is not good. They did not beat anybody in the top 70, so they just rolled through the non-conference, and they end up getting in a way that no other volleyball team has ever gotten in without let alone a top 50 win. They didn't have any wins in the top 70 this year. Yeah,
volleyball message board, I went deep to try to find to see what people were saying about it. And they were saying SDSU is the first team in about 20 years to get in with an at-large bid and not beat anybody in the top 50 in the RPI. And the volleyball version of KenPom had SDSU as the 3rd luckiest team in the country this year. I remember using that when SDSU played Providence. Providence was like the luckiest team in the country. Didn't work out. Providence still won. But, it's interesting how those things can sort of pop up. But
they played well against Miami. They should have won that second set. Yeah. They had a big lead and let it slip. Not going to beat the Hurricanes, but could have won a set.
And weren't going to beat Nebraska, obviously, if you would have won Anyway, my hot take on this is, and I'm not just saying it because it involves SDSU, but the Summit League volleyball tournament should be the tournament in the Summit League that has the mega buys or gives a team. There should be experimentation with the volleyball tournament. You don't have a TV contract. You don't have big attendance at the tournament. You don't have tons of money poured into it like you do the basketball tournament. I understand that there's reasons why the basketball tournament is the way it is in Sioux Falls because it's a huge moneymaker for the conference. Volleyball is not, and SDSU I think was 3 games better than everybody else in the league in volleyball. The number 1 seed should have an advantage in that, especially when you were 27-2 all year. So
you start up 2-0 in the championship.
Yeah, I don't know what you do, but or maybe it's got to be.
It's a 6-team tournament now.
Yes.
So how do you give the 1 seed a bye all the way to the championship? Do you play it out that way?
That's the weird. That's what I was going to bring up in a serious note is in a 6-team tournament. How do you give a team that much of an advantage? I just don't know.
This is not going to happen. But my idea is only the teams that are within whatever number of games you want to say at the end of the year, 4 games, 5 games of the leader are in the conference tournament.
Maybe it's 1, maybe it's 5.
If it's 3 teams, 5 teams, you just build the bracket on the spot and say, okay, this year it was 3 teams. We're going to have a 3-team tournament. It's going to take us 2 days to play it. That's what we're going to do.
Or you have to finish over 500 or something.
Yeah, or you got to be, yeah, exactly. And like you're saying, it's 6 teams now,
yep.
So maybe it doesn't have to be tweaked that much.
And St. Thomas didn't even make it, and they would have, and they were the only team to beat SDSU during the Summit League season.
Or another idea, if we're being honest, is it's double elimination for the 1 seed, and it's single elimination for everybody else.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's an idea.
But they were, Summit League very fortunate to get 2 teams in, USD and SDSU both knocked out in the first round, but good for them to get 2 teams in.
Yeah.
I will say, I thought right before they were announcing the bracket and whatnot, I heard a lot of there's no way.
Yeah.
I kind of thought the opposite because I saw someone pointed out that 2 or 3 years ago, maybe it's a little, but Denver was in a similar situation where they lost 1 conference game, then they lost maybe they went undefeated in conference even, then lost the championship game. Now they did have, I think they had a win against Utah.
Mm-hmm.
Denver did that year, so they had a quality win, but there was precedent for a Summit League or equivalent league team getting in under similar circumstances, so I wasn't altogether surprised.
USD a couple of years ago had a really good team that I think lost in the semifinals, and they did not get in, and they were like a 2-loss team. Mm-hmm. And I assume if SDSU would not have made it, they probably their RPI, their net would have been maybe the highest ever for a team not to make it.
That's probably true.
So that's the other end of the of the spectrum there. But yeah, just best season they've ever had, 27-3 for South Dakota State volleyball. We move on here. Marcus Traxler, Landon, Dierks. I'm Travis Kriens. There is no sport in which you can debate things and say, I think this team's better because of this than college football. Everything else is pretty cut and dry. You win your conference, you get in the playoffs. It's decided by record. College football playoff, the 12-team bracket came out yesterday, and I think everybody expected SMU to be that final team because they only lose by 3 on a 56-yard field goal to Clemson Saturday night in the ACC title game. They got off to a terrible start. They're down 14-0 right away. And if that game ends up as a 30-point margin, I think SMU probably doesn't get in, and Alabama does, because SMU had to show people something, and they did, almost coming back to win that game. So that meant a lot for SMU. They get that final at-large spot. But I think, I could argue Alabama should be in, but I don't think anybody was surprised based on the committee saying, yeah, we're not moving these teams a whole lot this week. Based on what happens in the conference title games.
I thought that was appropriate, and I think because that was my big question. We talked a little bit about it before. Is are you going to punish the teams that have to play a 13th game and allow a team that was sitting at home the weekend before to overtake them? And they didn't end up doing that in part because the SMU Clemson game was close. I'm just as you said, there's no sport that's more debated or more argued about than college football, I think, per capita, if you were to look at it that way. And it's been built on that. It took them 150 years to get to a playoff like this. So I think it's going to be fun. It's meant to be quirky. We've got Arizona State, we've got SMU, Indiana. And we've got Indiana, and we got Boise State all in the playoff. It's meant to be fun. And is the seeding maybe a little wonky? Yeah, but I think it will be something that we enjoy.
I think it's interesting that we're what, a decade into this whole playoff era of college football, right? It started in 2014, I think.
You could go back to the BCS if you wanted to, essentially, yeah.
14 playoff.
But and I'm still not sure anyone knows what the committee are they putting in the teams that deserve it most? Are they putting in the best teams? I still don't know that that's been ironed out because last year they talk about, Florida State didn't make it because most deserving isn't in our lexicon or whatever.
Their quarterback gets hurt and they look terrible.
Whereas this year you can't make, I don't think you can make the argument that SMU's a better football team than Alabama, objectively speaking.
If they were to play, I would think Alabama's had a couple of duds this year, and I would think Alabama would probably win that game, more times than not. So that's one case for the Crimson Tide.
And are they better on a straight up, neutral field? Would you pick Alabama, Miami, Ole Miss, South Carolina? You'd pick I think all those teams to beat SMU. And so it's like,
I'm glad
they're not picking based on who Vegas likes. If it was like, who does Vegas like? It'd be 8 SEC teams and 4 Big Ten teams, and we'd be done with it.
Which I find funny because Nick Saban, who's now a talking head on this show, is a couple years ago when they were in the box, he was the one arguing, we'd be favored over this team. And it's like, that's not how it works. It's what you did during the season, the track record. And he made the point also on the selection show that, we get caught up too much with record. How else are we supposed to decide who's supposed to be in this thing? It's not like, the NFL where we just go right down the list. And SMU did only have one loss. Notre Dame had one loss. That's how this works.
Indiana.
Yeah.
The one thing I'll say is in my opinion, if there's one league in the country where it's like, you're not what your record says you are, it's probably the SEC.
But they're the ones that agreed to expand to 16 teams. The Big Ten went to 18 teams. You're not playing everybody. The schedules have never been more warped than they are right now. And so I'm sorry that you're trading off the TV money that you're getting for this kind of convoluted schedule. And, it's been talked about already in the 24 hours since we've learned the bracket. But Alabama's complaining about the non-conference schedule. Your problem wasn't the non-conference schedule. It was the 3 games you lost.
What are they talking about, though? They're Alabama's athletic director says they need to now reevaluate their non-conference schedule this year, which was a bad Wisconsin team that they blew out, and they also blew out. I mean, South Florida was a close game. They ended up winning by 3 touchdowns, and then they blew out Western Kentucky. What is he talking about?
And they played Mercer.
What is he talking about? Schedule cupcakes? Is that has nothing That has nothing to do with what he should be talking about. Is should we expand to maybe 10 conference games? Yeah. Or 9 conference games. That would maybe alleviate some of the big eye opener for me is how terrible teams in certain conferences, how terrible their schedule was. All the teams that are good this year had awful schedules. SMU, and you look at Arizona State. These teams did not play the top teams in their conference. So that's, Indiana. They played Ohio State. That is it. They didn't play any other, what you would consider, it was a down year for the Big Ten, but they didn't play Oregon, and they didn't play Penn State. So, that's the big eye-opener of just looking at playoffs for future years. You can never quite predict who's going to have an easy schedule, but if you look and say, okay, they're not playing anybody who's expected to be a top team in this conference, they can probably go undefeated or get 1 loss. And if you're going, if you're going to be a 2-loss team, you're making the playoff.
And I think that's part of, I think that's kind of the understanding of if I win my game, if I'm in the SEC,
even if you don't
or
play
if I'm
anybody.
in the Big Ten, and if I don't have more than 2 losses, I'm going to be in this thing. And Indiana maybe would be the one team that would have been screwed, and that might have been on name recognition if they would have had a second loss. But it's built. We had this expansion, and I think it will expand again at some point to go to 14 or 16 because these people just can't help themselves, and ESPN also will pay for it. But I just think it's really interesting to see. Now we actually have this thing, this idea that we weren't going to have debate. We've always had debate, and we have debate over the 68th and 69th team in the NCAA tournament, and that's just how it is. And because it's a tribal sport, and because it is territorial, and it is unbalanced, and not easy to figure out all the time.
They need a chassis adjustment is what they need. That's how unbalanced it is. It's tight in, loose going out.
That's right.
Turn
that track bar. Let's get this thing fixed.
Getting that going there. I'm going to talk to a friend of ours, Nathan Stacken, later today, and I think we're going to go head-to-head because Alabama was my pick to win the whole thing, and he doesn't like Alabama. And I'll make the argument that Alabama should. I'm fine with them being out, but I easily make the argument Alabama should be, and I think you're kind of Alabama. You could
they are objectively one of the 12 best teams in the country.
And you just look at
they are not one of the 12 best teams as the formula dictated. I mean, the committee literally said they're the 11th best team in the country.
Clemson's. If Clemson doesn't win, then Alabama's in this thing. So it's up to Clemson.
But 14th ranked Arizona State and 16th ranked Clemson, because of the format, are in. Like the committee agrees.
I guess it should be Alabama and Miami should be in. I would argue South Carolina should be in over Miami, but if you're looking at what teams shouldn't have gotten in.
But South Carolina had the head-to-head losses, so they can't sit there and complain too much.
I truly believe if Alabama just doesn't get bodied by Oklahoma, like a bad Oklahoma team,
And also, since you talked about SMU Clemson, they had the exact wrong outcome, because if Clemson blows them out, they're in. If SMU blows them out, they're in. But it was a close game, and so that ends up being the middle territory. And to what you're saying, I don't have a problem with SMU being in. It would be fine if Alabama was in. It's objectively funny that SMU is in over Alabama. Yeah. Just those two, I love that just on that basis.
I would have loved, in that light, I would have loved it to be a fly on the wall in the Alabama facility on Saturday night, where heading into the fourth quarter, they were probably cheering hard for Clemson.
Yeah.
And then in the final seconds, they were probably cheering so hard for SMU.
Yeah, now we need SMU. Yeah, and
go for two at the end. You're 1 for 2.
Yep.
Just the mood shift in that room from a whole group of guys rooting for Clemson to a whole group of guys rooting for SMU had to be funny to watch.
You say, okay, who's better, SMU, Alabama? If they played at the Sugar Bowl, maybe take Alabama. They'd be favored. Figure how that would go. You look at Alabama's schedule, significantly tougher than SMU's. Just switch the schedules. If Alabama was in the ACC playing SMU's schedule, would they go 11-1? Would they go 11-2? I probably think so, if not better than that. SMU, if they were Alabama's schedule, if they were in the ACC or SEC, would they have been 9-3? They probably would have been worse than 9-3. So that's another way to look at it. You combine Alabama and SMU schedule. Put all of them on a list. Rank them by toughest game. Rank them by best win. You got to get down to like the 4th or 5th line before an SMU game gets there. The best win in the toughest game all year was Georgia for Alabama. That was a win. The second one would be, you would say Tennessee probably is the second toughest game on those schedules. They lose that game by a touchdown. Third toughest game, you look at maybe South Carolina or LSU. Those would be my 3 and my 4. And then I'd get to SMU at number 5 and that Clemson, which was a loss.
They lost.
So that means if the top 4 toughest games and 3 of those were wins.
SMU's best win was against Louisville.
Yeah.
But this goes back to exactly what Landon was saying. Every year the committee has to hold something else in importance. This year it was either, do we hold the strength of schedule and the better conference?
Or do we completely destroy the meaning of conference championship games?
I feel like they usually go with the team that's got the fewer losses. I think we haven't seen, it's usually been an 11-1 team versus an 11-1 team. So you're looking at who had the worst loss in that case. But I feel like we're not going to have many examples of a 3-loss team getting in over a 2-loss team, even if Alabama's schedule, I think, is quite significantly better, even than Indiana's.
Yes.
Indiana's strength of schedule was, I think, 125th out of 130 before they played Ohio State. I think that one game vaulted on like 50 or 60 spots, which, if that's the case, I don't like that formula in which...
They finished in the mid-50s, I think.
Who were
game?
Who were the top teams in the Big Ten this year? Oregon, didn't play them. Ohio State played them. Didn't play Penn State. Didn't play Illinois. Didn't play Iowa. Played Michigan.
Nebraska.
Didn't play Illinois. Played Nebraska.
And they
didn't play Minnesota.
Yeah, it's like...
Yeah,
that's rough.
So, it's just, and when it's an 18-team league, the Big Ten does play 9 conference games, but that's half the league you're leaving out, essentially. And it's going to be this way. And I think we also had a little bit of like, we all follow college football and we're all cool with it, but then when we actually see the final bracket, now we have our grievances that we want to share. And once the games kick off, it'll be fine. But I think it is what it is.
Because a lot of people think Oregon has a tough route, and
they're right.
Penn State does not. But it's like, well, we don't know how these are gonna end up. We don't like.
If you had just seeded the field 1 through 12, though, it would be
much better.
Yeah, you still let the same teams in, but don't have the goofy buys or don't have the goofy conference championship rules, and you would be you would think you'd be better off. You might not be,
but you've got Penn State versus SMU. Penn State probably wins, but who says they do?
This is James Franklin we're talking about here. Yeah.
And then they take on Boise State. They're going to be favored in that game. Penn State would
by
be
15 points,
but we'll see how it plays out.
Yeah.
Penn State has not impressed me. Beaten, not a bad Minnesota team, beating them by 1.
Gopher should have beaten them.
Yeah, they should have.
They scored 37 points on Oregon. That was good.
That was a good show. What the game didn't really matter as far as seeding a little bit, but both teams were in. I needed to see something from Penn State, and they scored some points. I needed to see that. I needed to see something from SMU, because if you couldn't have been competitive with kind of a so-so Clemson team, if we're talking about the elites of the elites, Clemson's a ring behind that. They needed to compete, and they finally did after a bad first quarter. So I needed to see how these teams did against good competition. Indiana, they failed their test against Ohio State. Yes. They did not. First drive was excellent. They didn't do anything the rest of the game.
I would just like to confirm that our former compatriot, Zach Lambert, is over the moon about Penn State's draw. So that's how you know it's a good draw.
Yeah.
But they got to prove they can win one of these games, because they don't win these games.
Yeah. I mean, the caliber of their opponent is...
But that's what do you mean by these? This isn't even one of these games.
Probably not.
The number next to the team's name, sure.
Yeah.
But
it's a playoff game, though. But this is a playoff game. These games matter.
They're playing a non-conference home game. It just happens to be in December.
Are you trying to tell me that if they don't win this game, people aren't going to be pitchforks?
They should win this game.
They're not playing Tennessee.
No. And then in the next round, they would play Boise State, which would be another game of you should win this game.
Respectfully, I kind of like SMU, so I kind of hope SMU keeps it closer maybe and wins. But I think Penn State's going to smoke both these teams. Penn State got a double bye into the semifinals.
That's why they play the games. We'll see.
Right. I also, 2 things. Well, one thing on all these games for me.
One big thing,
if you don't mind. Indiana, Notre Dame. Here's your show me something game.
I think Notre Dame's going to win by 40 points.
Show me something, Indiana. Okay, it didn't go how you wanted against Ohio State. A lot of talking from Cignetti. Let's see it. Cignetti's kind of running his mouth, and I think.
I like their coach, but
I don't
think they're anywhere near Notre Dame.
You got to go do it. Clemson, they are better here at the end of the season. Texas should win this game, but
Texas can be had.
And
if Texas doesn't play Arch Manning get him involved in the game plan somehow, they're not going to go very far.
Yep. And then, Tennessee at Ohio State speaks for itself. Tennessee.
A guy's job is on the line in that game. If Ohio State loses, Ryan Day will be fired by midnight that night.
Yep.
There's no doubt about that.
Which is just crazy to me. But
it's crazy, and
it's ridiculous.
And I'll be watching.
So what's the other one?
He will be rehired by somebody so fast.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So...
And something that I don't think it doesn't get talked about at all. It doesn't get weighed at all. And I don't know if they discuss this. Something that I don't like. And I look at some of these teams. I'm like, well, is Texas really number 3? Is Georgia really number 5? And I nitpick it. Well, they're not because of this. But then who is? If they're not, well, then you just didn't have enough teams this year to take over their spot. But I'm talking about games like Texas playing Vanderbilt, they win by 3. Vanderbilt was a good team.
There was a 4-week stretch there where Vanderbilt might as well have been 2020 Alabama or something.
I do not think the Alabama loss to Vanderbilt was this terrible loss.
I don't either.
Biggest upset of the year. Well, let's wait and see how these teams figure out. Vanderbilt was ranked for a couple weeks. Turns out Vanderbilt was actually a pretty good team.
That quarterback's a good player.
Yeah. They finished 6-6, but again, that's product of the conference, right?
So is there much difference between Texas beating Vanderbilt by 3 and Alabama losing to Vanderbilt by 5? To me, That is a razor-thin margin. I think the committee thinks and most people think, well, you won and you lost. That is a vast difference. I'm like, no, it is not.
That's a 1,000-point difference in win percentage.
It has to matter.
It is. It matters. I think it should matter a little tiny bit.
No, it has to matter more than that. It has to.
And I think it does.
Yeah.
I wish it did not matter as much as it did. And I look at Georgia. You look at Georgia's schedule. I look at anybody's schedule.
Okay, Kirby, here we go.
Here's the schedule.
They sent us on the road every dang week.
You got one road game a month. What a terrible feeling. You look at Georgia's schedule. You look at it. What were their 2 worst performances of the year? And to me, it is not their 2 losses.
The first half against Alabama
as a game.
Georgia Tech, right? Over in the
I don't even know.
No,
you just tell me then.
I'll tell you. Georgia's 2 worst performances all year was week 3 when they beat Kentucky 13-12.
That was ugly.
That is their worst game they've played all year.
That was ugly.
Kentucky could not. They gave Kentucky chances, but that's a win, and that's not going to get discussed and dissected because Kentucky's a 3-win team. They were a 4-win team.
And then they got beat over the head by Ole Miss.
They did, but their second worst performance was probably a 41-31 win versus Mississippi State, where this is a 10-point game with 2 minutes to go. And they were a team that did not win a game in the conference this year. Mississippi State went 0-8, and they were 3-9. Those are the 2 worst teams in the league. They won both of those games, but to me, those are in the category of almost losses. You played like crap, and nobody's going to bring that up as far as the rankings are concerned because they won, even though this was a bad game.
I thought you were going to bring up the UMass game. Didn't they give up a ton of rushing yards to UMass? I mean, so there's always. And
then the Georgia Tech game, it's like how close can you come to a loss? It's an 8 overtime game, so that's razor thin.
And now in the bracket, they're going to play in
number 2.
They're going to play in Atlanta. If they win, they play in Miami. If they're in the championship, it'll be back in Atlanta.
Yeah,
they're in a really good spot.
Yeah, I guess it all comes down to, I know he hasn't had the best season, but if Carson Beck is out,
I think he sucks.
I don't think he's great, but he's better than the backup.
I take that back. They're getting sent. Is this right? They're getting sent to New Orleans. They're playing in the Sugar Bowl. Yeah. So they're not in Atlanta. They're in the Sugar Bowl.
Close enough.
Yeah.
Oh, another road game for Kirby.
But I mean, be honest. Georgia's a really good football team.
They have been disappointed. Like them in Texas, and to a lesser extent Penn State. Georgia and Texas. I watch them every week. I'm like, do something to impress me. Texas's defense is really good. I just wait every week. Do something. I'm poking them with a stick. Do something good. Texas beats who they beat the other week, 17-7.
Texas A&M.
It's like, okay. It's like, beat them, please. Beat them convincingly. Texas A&M played terribly in that game. Do something. And just never. Georgia, do something. They're down 17-0 to Georgia Tech. They trail in almost every. We'll get to this.
I thought
Georgia's like the Kansas City Chiefs of college. Like, do something.
It might
be
sound
impressive.
Really stupid, but I thought Georgia's second win over Texas was one of the most impressive results I've seen all season.
But then
you played.
I will say this.
Statistically speaking, you did not play well at all. God. And honestly, you look at the stats, Texas should have won that game going away. And Georgia was just like, nope, we're gonna find a way to win the game.
I thought the first half of
without a quarterback.
I thought the first half of Georgia Texas was maybe the worst half of football I had seen all year.
The first half's the half I didn't see.
I mean, dropped passes. There were dropped interceptions, receivers dropping passes. This was horrendous football. All good defense.
I wasn't talking about the quality. I'm just.
I know it was bad. And then these are 2 teams. Like, these are the 2 teams that I don't like because they don't meet the expectations of everybody. Oh, they're among the best, and they may be. And Georgia may win this entire thing.
I mean, be honest. Would you be entirely surprised if the national championship is Texas and Georgia again?
Probably not.
Not really.
No, but it's like, Quinn Ewers.
He doesn't do it for me.
No, it just.
That's why I said they need to get Arch Manning involved. So I'm not saying bench Quinn Ewers,
but it's like if you're Nick Saban, that's what you did in a national title game, and it won you the game. And I would say Arch Manning's probably better than Quinn Ewers.
I'm just talking like Arch Manning, get him involved in the run. Like, he's proven that.
And Quinn Ewers has
that RPO game. He's nasty.
He's got an injured ankle at the moment, So, and that's part of the deal. And Georgia's backup quarterback gives them a running element. So they've got, a little bit of a dual threat if he's not quite as good. And another game, Boise State's worst game all year was, they beat Wyoming 17-13.
Yeah.
And Wyoming's a 3-4 win team. So, yeah, just because you win, that's okay.
Didn't Wyoming get housed by Idaho?
I don't remember.
And Wyoming beat Washington State. That was a good win for them. But I don't think, and this is never going to happen, but the close wins versus terrible teams do not weigh into this at all, which I think should be a fact.
It's about winning. It is about winning. So, I can't get too crazy about that.
But then,
because you can't slice and dice every game. I mean, they're just not able to do that. So I do understand that you just have to put an emphasis on winning. That's what it's about. Everybody's judged by their win-loss record. So that has to be part of the equation. I just want to say also, you brought up Boise State. Them playing Oregon close carried a lot.
I don't think they get enough credit for that because it's like
that carries a lot of. I think it does carry some weight.
Why are they not a top 5 team?
Yeah.
Like if Indiana can go through their schedule undefeated and be 5th at that time.
But if you play like crap against Wyoming, but you play good against Oregon, like what are we supposed to do with that? It's
like I would switch them. I would say, you know what, that Wyoming game, I kind of consider that a loss. That Oregon game, I kind of consider that a win.
Go through all the games and give me
just kind of go
wins and losses.
Wins, losses.
Yeah. I want to see your top 25 with all that.
It's about the same.
Okay, all right.
It's like just weigh things, and they talk how you play and how you beat a team and margin of victory. And it's like, well, I don't think there's a lot played to that.
I brought up the BCS because I love the people have been running the numbers on the BCS, and we basically get the exact same order of all these teams. It's like, well, maybe just go back and let the computers do it because then we'll still argue about it, but then it's an objective measurement.
Yeah. And you have a lot of teams here that are in this thing that didn't beat anybody. They don't have that top 25 win. Texas is a team that doesn't have an impressive win. Penn State doesn't have that impressive win. I look at teams who are the.
I give Texas credit for trying though. They didn't know Michigan was going to suck.
You never know. They played them the year before, and you never know. But you look at teams, and I like to look at, okay, who are the 3 best teams you played this year, and how did you do against those 3 best teams?
And that's why SMU probably shouldn't be in the.
And I look at Texas, and you didn't do very well against kind of the 3 best teams. Penn State, you did not do well against the 3 best teams. Alabama, you did really good against the 3 best teams. You beat Georgia, you beat LSU, you beat South Carolina. You didn't do so well against some teams you should have beat. So college football playoff, couple games on TNT, that'll be exciting. And ESPN producing all those broadcasts, a week off. Bowl pick'em, any bowl pick'em thoughts? I have not gone through this extensively, but the Mayo Bowl.
There's bowl games other
there
than
are bowl games.
The playoff
somehow
games.
that stayed alive. Somehow all these other 7 and 8 win teams get to play again.
How many of the 134 FBS teams get a bowl?
70 some. Yeah.
Jesus.
My very quick thoughts, if you will allow
Yes,
me.
I will.
Memphis against West Virginia in the Frisco Bowl is probably the 2 best brand names they've ever had in the Frisco Bowl. I don't know how. Memphis is ranked 25th. They are a slight favorite. West Virginia, of course, doesn't have a coach. I did go to the Gasparilla Bowl one time. You got Tulane against Florida. Florida right now is 12-point favorite in that game. So
Florida against who?
Tulane. Right. Tulane is keeping their coach. Florida is keeping their coach. Going down the list, we do have the Christmas Eve game, the Hawaii Bowl this year, USF against San Jose State. That's good. Oklahoma against Navy in Fort Worth. That's a strange one.
Right.
Oklahoma favored by 8.5 points there.
I'll take the under on that one.
Yeah, for sure. The Holiday Bowl is Syracuse against Washington State. Washington State did pretty good with an assignment, considering they're not in a conference, still benefiting from the Big 12 bowl tie-ins there. Nebraska at the Pinstripe Bowl against Boston College. Nebraska, a 4-point favorite at this stage. That game on ABC on December 28th. Pop-Tarts Bowl, again, has 2 top 20 teams, Miami and Iowa State. Miami is slight favorite at this point. The Alamo Bowl does have BYU and Colorado, teams that are in the same conference.
That's great.
I saw that.
I love it.
But did not play during the year, so that's good. Colorado, a 1-point favorite. And from what we've gathered, according to Dion, these star players are going to play for Colorado, so that is a good thing as well. Iowa and Missouri, I believe, were supposed to play the COVID year in Nashville. It got canceled. They're playing this time around. Alabama and Michigan was a semifinal game last year. It is the Tampa Bowl this time around, the former Outback Bowl. Alabama favored by 11.5.
Didn't they just play in the Outback Bowl a couple years ago?
I mean, Alabama hasn't been in.
Without
they haven't
a playoff?
been in these bowls in a while. They're in
Sure they have.
The Citrus Bowl, maybe. I think
one of those bowls down
yeah.
there. I feel like they did. They definitely did.
The other one that jumps out to me point spread wise is South Carolina is 11.5 point favorites against Illinois in Orlando on December 31st. And then my Gophers playing Virginia Tech in the Duke's Mayo Bowl on January 3rd. And Minnesota 4.5 point favorites. I don't think PJ Fleck likes mayonnaise, but he could potentially be bathed in it if they win the game, have it all dumped on him. So, but he is already in pitchman status. I saw the clip last night, so that's good.
Could you have picked a better game for your interests?
It's pretty good.
Would you rather have gone to the Outback Bowl or one of those Florida Bowl games?
There was discussion if they got to the Music City Bowl, maybe going to that game. So I was maybe rooting, me personally, but that did not happen. I will not go watch Iowa. And I've already seen Missouri in a bowl game. They were in the Gasparilla Bowl a few years ago. So, I'm cool with Minnesota playing Virginia Tech. That works.
Good bowl slate. Those start in earnest next week in college football playoff. Podcast continues. Travis Kriens, Marcus Traxler, Landon Dierks. We'll touch a little bit on the NFL. Vikings continue to win, 11-2 now. They beat the Falcons 42-21 yesterday. Another close game, 21-21 in the fourth quarter, and something weird happened where they just blew them out in the fourth. It was 3 straight touchdowns and long 95, 98-yard drive. That was kind of the drive where you're up 2 scores. Okay, you punt, Falcons get it back, they make it a 7-point game. It's a close one at the end, but no, that was a drive. They ran right down the field and scored and put the game away, and Sam Darnold had a career day. 5 touchdowns, nearly 350 yards, probably his best performance as a Viking. They were just throwing that ball all around the field yesterday, and it's probably the best the offense has looked all year long. Against
Just the dichotomy of the Falcons and the Vikings and where the Falcons are going and where the Vikings are going. And Darnold, 11 touchdowns, no picks since November 10th. Cousins, no touchdowns, 8 picks since November 3rd. And he's still number 2 in Cousins is number 2 in passing yards, but he has not had a good season.
And you look at this game as far as, padding stats and whatnot, it's like, well, you're down by a lot. You continue to throw. Yeah, he's having the worst year of his career.
The irony of the Vikings winning by 3 scores in a game against Kirk Cousins, who was famous for close games while he was with the Vikings, is just terrific. And Landon Dierks, Sam Darnold has 28 touchdowns at this point.
I was about to, after the 5 touchdown day, I was about to congratulate
Thank you,
Travis on.
He called it.
He's going to get there. That 5 touchdowns really helped.
I had said Sam Darnold's going to throw.
I felt okay at 23 heading into this week. I felt like okay. I'm like, he throws like one or two.
I think he's had a touchdown in maybe one game, the Jacksonville game. They didn't score a touchdown, but he's had a touchdown in every game other than that passing.
I know, but I was like,
and a lot of them have been 2 touchdown games. I mean, and it's been at the expense of them not running the ball really. And yesterday it was 5 passing touchdowns and a rushing touchdown. So for the Vikings,
congratulations on your first round exit.
Yeah, we'll get into that a bit.
I'm under no illusion that they're going to win the Super Bowl. No. But the fact they just keep doing this week in and week out does. How do you not build some confidence?
Congratulations on your divisional round appearance because you'll play those Falcons again.
Yeah.
Well, maybe. I thought Sam Darnold would throw 30 touchdowns. He'll probably throw 35 now, and I thought, I'm not surprised he's playing this well because I thought, you're going to play pretty well in this offense, and now the question becomes. He's got to be your quarterback next year. I think they will figure out a 2-year deal seems about right. Do you go somewhere for 5 years, big money?
That's the question for him.
And you're not going to do anywhere. Do you need the money? No. Do you go somewhere and not be anywhere close to this, or you stay with the Vikings? You can win. J.J. McCarthy is the future years from now, but he has to stay here and they have to sign him. And I think some dumb shit tried to make it, they haven't talked to him yet. There's no need to talk to him for a contract. There's absolutely no need to get that done right now. Wait till the season's done. So that's just another made-up story. It's like, no, don't talk. There's no reason to talk contract right now. Finish the season. He wants to be here. I'm sure they want him. J.J. McCarthy coming off a knee injury. He doesn't need to play next year either. I think Sam Darnold will be this team's quarterback next year too.
Sam Darnold, according to one of your favorite websites, Spotrac,
thank you,
has made $65.2 million so far in his career. It was not plenty. It was not enough for Kirk Cousins because he went and got more. And I will not blame Sam Darnold if he wants to go get more, but he has seen the scales of justice in his career of good situation, good fostering environment for him as a quarterback, less money. Bad situations, more money. So he's going to have to make that decision. I do think there's something to be said, and Greg Olson brought it up in the broadcast on Sunday. The Vikings have $10 million slotted in at the quarterback position this year and the next 4 years with J.J. McCarthy. That freed you up to get Jonathan Grenard and Blake Cashman and all these other guys on defense that have made all these plays. And there is a value to that as well. We don't know what J.J. McCarthy looks like as a Viking. We only saw him for half a game before he hurt his knee. But I got to think Kevin O'Connell knows, and Kevin O'Connell knows what he has to work with. And so if he decides we're going to go on without, and more importantly, Kwesi, if he decides to go on without Sam Darnold, so be it. Because I think if it were up to Kevin O'Connell, he would have kept Kirk Cousins. He liked him. But somebody made the call that it was too much money and we're going to move on and we're going to do Darnold. And that same question is going to have to be made. It'll be interesting because there are some parallels to the Case Keenum situation as well. Defense not quite as good for the Vikings as it was then when they brought in Kirk Cousins originally. But
I think Darnold playing also better than he was. So.
I just think I won't blame the Vikings if they move on. Because the plan is J.J. McCarthy, and I don't know. I wouldn't be too upset if I'm being honest. You have to trust the leadership.
I would be kind of upset.
Yeah.
Is Daniel Jones on this team next year?
I think so.
It's just a 1 year thing. They brought him into. I don't think J.J. McCarthy's starting week 1.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So he had that knee injury early in the preseason. So
it wasn't an ACL.
No.
So that leads me.
I'm sure he could start. I'm not sure you want him week 1. All right, you're the guy.
Yeah.
Ease him into it. So
if they can work out a contract that makes sense, I'm cool with Darnold.
Here's the deal:
too.
Win the Super Bowl. A lot of people can retire. Harrison Smith can retire. We're gonna got to pay him $10 million, $15 million a year. That would free up.
You're only asking the Vikings to do something they've never done.
And if they do that, I don't care who the quarterback is.
That's true.
You can have Spurgeon Wynn be the quarterback. I don't care. They win the Super Bowl. I couldn't care less. You look at where Minnesota is, that 5 seed at 11-2. Chasing Detroit, they're still a game behind the Lions. Lions have Buffalo next week. Vikings host the Bears. That's kind of the Vikings' last chance to pick up a game on Detroit. Vikings have Seattle in a couple weeks. I think
they
probably
still have to play another time.
Yeah, they play at the end of the year.
They did point out yesterday, and who knows what. I mean, the 49ers look like they're done, but the 49ers might have something to play for. They still play the Lions, but yeah.
And I think, at Seattle, I think is a tough game for the Vikings.
Absolutely.
And they still have the Packers.
No cakewalk for the Vikings either.
Yeah, so you're looking at the 1 seed. You're still alive for that. You don't want to know who my favorite coach is?
I know.
You know?
He's got a D on his hat.
Yes. Dan Campbell for his name. Dan Campbell. Aggressive, going for the win instead of settling for a field goal, which maybe could have been a win. So Detroit at 12-1. They've got a lot of injuries on defense. I think he should be the coach of the year. There's Mike Tomlin. There's Kevin O'Connell. I'm going to say Dan Campbell making these 4th down decisions. Is he starting to change everybody else's idea of it's okay to go for it on 4th down? It's okay to maybe fail, because it seems like we've seen that a lot more. Like early in games when you're inside your own 40, teams are going for it on 4th and short. It's like, oh yeah, you should probably pick that up. And if you don't, oh well. And right now their defense not very good with the injuries. You want to keep the ball on offense.
Scoring 50 points a game.
You want to keep the offense is the strength of this team.
Having possession of the ball means a lot.
Yes.
Not punting it back to the other team means a lot.
Yes. And just because you don't make it doesn't mean they're going to score. Sometimes they will. Sometimes your defense can also get a stop. So are we seeing this more? Do we credit him? Is it just teams they have to see it done first before, like, okay, they can do that. The media's not going to roast me. The fans aren't going to roast me because I went for a 4th down. I don't know.
I think there is, I agree with what you're saying about you got to see it to believe it type thing. But I remember who was the coach of the Chargers before?
Marty Schottenheimer?
No, just recently.
Oh, yeah. Brandon Staley?
Brandon Staley. He went on 4th. He was pretty aggressive, and a lot of them didn't work out, and it was one of many problems the Chargers had, and he got fired. So I guess there's that side of it too. I agree with you. I think having the ball on offense, we saw it on Sunday night with the end of the Chiefs game where they're just like, we're not giving it back to the Chargers if we can help it, and they ran out the clock so that they could kick a field goal at the end. And you watch the Falcons against the Vikings. They started the game aggressive, going for a couple 4th downs. Then they backed off and they punted and they kicked a field goal in a couple. And it's just like, Well, you didn't really stick with it. I would like to see all the coaches ranked 1 through 32 on how aggressive they are. I feel like Kevin O'Connell is probably in the top 10. I don't know that for sure, but Dan Campbell seems like he's far and away the number one guy when it comes to
you have a great offensive line. You have two tremendous running backs.
Yeah.
You have a quarterback who's very good in Jared Goff. So, you should go for it more times than not. So, you've got...
And you also, the tush push has never been more in vogue. You see a lot of teams doing that, college, pro. So you would think the 4th and 1, we're going for it more than ever on that front.
Do you have a word or two to describe the Kansas City Chiefs?
I do.
What do you got?
Lucky.
Lucky.
I was going to say lucky as, and then you could...
Annoying? Are you annoyed by them? Every week this happens?
I'm not annoyed because the more they keep winning like this, the more I'm convinced somebody's going to beat them in the playoffs. And
it could be like they could beat them by 3 touchdowns, where everything just collapses at once.
This happened to the Vikings a couple years ago, all these one-score games, and then they lose.
You just win, and I guess it doesn't matter how you win in the NFL, but there's something to be said about point differential.
And I think they had the stat that it's like plus 50 for the whole season for them.
And if you turnover margin, I think they're -4.
Yeah.
Going into the game yesterday, it's like those things are kind of good indicators of what to expect. They're not 100% true, but if you're not beating Carolina or the Raiders by a whole lot, I mean,
I'm not annoyed because I find Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid, Travis Kelce to a large extent just as likable characters.
I
don't know about likable with Patrick Mahomes and his brother, but
I'm not. I didn't count his brother.
I'm just saying the whole shoot match there. But they are extremely talented, and you cannot deny the talent. I feel the same way about them as.
To me, they're I got tortured by Tom Brady and Bill Belichick as a Steelers fan growing up. They're the antithesis. For me, the complete antithesis of those guys. Like, I did not like Belichick and Brady. I don't mind Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes and company.
I like Travis Kelce. I, for the most part, like Andy Reid. And I would say...
You know what? I mean, my favorite commercial line right now is the Fumble Rooski. It's very annoying. I can't get enough of it.
Oh, okay. All right.
I'm in the minority there. But.
Yeah, I guess so. But I just have a feeling that go down your list of teams, the Bills, the Steelers, the Ravens.
I mean,
whoever's going to be in the playoffs, all these teams are capable of beating them. And so,
but
did you say that you think the Steelers are going to be in the playoffs?
I think so.
Yeah.
Did that hurt?
No, because the Vikings are in the playoffs. I don't care.
Baltimore is a team that never wins. They always fall short. They can never win that big. They're the Penn State.
Yeah.
Buffalo. How many times can Buffalo lose to Kansas City in the playoffs when you are just as good as them, if not better? How many times can this happen? So
and the way it's going, that game will probably be in Kansas City, even though Buffalo beat Kansas City already this year.
Yeah.
So
only team to do so.
It's a strange situation.
I feel like it's all building perhaps to Detroit and Kansas City, the game won last year, and it's going to come down to a Dan Campbell 4th down of, all right, people didn't like maybe what he did against Green Bay. If you're in that exact same situation against the Chiefs, I bet everybody's saying you got to go for it. Because if you kick that field goal, you're going to give Patrick Mahomes the ball with 35, 40 seconds left.
Yeah.
He's going to get that field goal at the very least, go to overtime. Dan Campbell's going to say, no, we're going to keep the ball. We're not going to give it back to you. We're going to get that touchdown or that field goal. So, I mean, there's going to be a big 4th down that Detroit is either going to make or they're going to fail.
Didn't they have that last year in the NFC Championship game? And they didn't get it. And
people roasted them because they didn't try again. I defended.
But that's who they are. That is what they've done, and that's what they're doing now, and nothing has changed, and that's perfectly fine. To what Landon was saying, though, maybe the Chiefs really are generational, and they become the first team to win 3 Super Bowls, and sort of.
I'm not saying that.
No, I'm just saying, like, if they are that team, they'll go out and do that because they have. Last year they showed it. I
feel like last year
they're one team during the year, and they're another team in the playoffs.
Any team,
they turn it on, bro.
I hate the teams that flip the switch. It's like, okay, we're just gonna. All right,
they're that good though. What are you
trying now? I guess
you gonna argue that? I mean,
when you've won 12 games a year for 7 years or whatever it is now, it's like
won 9 divisions in a row or something. Yeah,
a lot of that with Alex Smith.
Yeah,
and I go back to the college point of teams winning barely. I feel like the whole conversation with the Chiefs would change if they would have lost some of these, if they would have lost to Carolina, or if the Raiders wouldn't have screwed a last second snap. That if the Broncos didn't get a field, if they'd be 8-4 right now, or 9-4, be like, well, what's wrong with Kansas City? It's like, well, there's a very thin margin.
If Isaiah Likely's foot is a little smaller, it's
like 12-1, they could literally be like 6-7. They go to overtime versus Tampa Bay. There's not much difference between them completely missing the playoffs. And they won all these games. Well, yeah, they are barely winning these games.
Yeah, no, there's certainly something to be said about that, but at the end of the day, it's a team that I do believe is capable of reaching a new level in the postseason, and they're going to have to. And that postseason is going to go through Arrowhead Stadium, and so take that for what you will.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody would say the Chiefs are playing well right now.
No,
you say, they're winning these games, but they're not playing well. They're not playing well right now.
Conversely, a team that's playing well and winning these games is the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Steelers are,
except when they're in a snow game against James.
That was weird.
Thursday nights are weird. Thursday night games are weird.
Russell Wilson, he's had good games, bad. How much?
What do you mean bad games?
He's the future.
I liked his 150 yards there against Cleveland. Really impressive.
We won the game by 2 touchdowns. What did you need him to do?
Are they? I don't know. Are they? I guess they play Kansas City or Christmas Day. That'll be a big test. I mean, that's a game that is a step up in competition for Kansas City based on what they've played the last month, and that's a game if you're a Steelers fan, you're like, we should probably win that game if we play like we have been.
If the teams keep winning, that all of a sudden is a game that Kansas City kind of needs to win to make sure they hold on to the 1 seed. So we'll get a good sense of where both those teams are at.
When I look at Kansas City, I'm like, they could lose any of these games. They've got at Cleveland next week. I think they could lose to the Browns. They ended the year at Denver.
Well, anyone can lose to the Browns right now if Jameis decides he's going to go on a heater.
They've got, at Denver I think they could lose at Denver. So none of these games I look at is, they're going to run the table. I don't quite think so. So one team that I like, I guess, there's one team that's beaten the Eagles. They only have 2 losses. They're the only team to beat Detroit.
The Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
They took Kansas City to overtime.
They might not even win their division.
Yeah.
I think they will, yeah.
And there's a very good chance the Vikings would play them.
If they tie the Falcons, they lose the tiebreaker. They lost both games.
I think the Falcons are about toast.
The Falcons play the Saints, the Raiders, and the Panthers.
Hey, we got prime Kirk Cousins. Panthers are playing pretty well.
I'm just saying, because I don't think at this
Tampa
point
Bay,
in time, Tampa Bay wouldn't make the postseason if they don't win the division.
Right.
No. Yeah. They got the Chargers. If they beat the Chargers, I think they win out. They got Dallas, Carolina,
if they beat the Chargers are still playing for something.
I don't think it. I think it's Tampa Bay and the Vikings.
Tampa Bay has to go 3-1, I think.
Oh yeah, I think they can.
If the Panthers
they can, but are they going to?
If the Panthers would have beaten Kansas City, they were another team that had Kansas City on the ropes. They would have been right back in the division race after being just written off because that division's pretty. And then of course they lost to the Eagles.
That division's really good, is what you meant.
Nope.
Final month of the season. NFL, quickly to wrap it up, any thoughts on high school football? Mitchell Kernels girls start on Friday.
Basketball, you mean?
Basketball, that too. We got the boys start next week on a Tuesday at Watertown. They'll be number 1. Mitchell should be. They will be number 1, most talented team in AA. I think they've got the 2 best players in AA, so that helps things. How do you see things here early on? A long way to go, but obviously they will be a favorite to win a second straight title and get there for the 3rd year in a row. And I think it'd probably be a disappointment if they did not win again.
In that vein of thought, I just think
a lot
of especially early on, is just how are they going to handle the noise of being the best team from a year ago and bringing the bulk of that back. If they handle that well, I think they're going to be fine. That's not something that's I don't think that's something that's easy to do when you're 16, 17, 18 years old. You can kind of get in your own head a little bit, I'm sure, and I think they have obviously the coaching staff and the talent to kind of get that sorted, and I think they'll be fine. It's a question of how many teams do you think got better to close the gap on Mitchell? And I don't know that list is very big.
Sioux Falls, Washington.
Everybody's kind of looking at them.
I think that's a list.
Maybe Huron.
Huron. Yep.
Blake Elwine is going to be a legit player here. So, but
Porish, Anderson, Porish.
When you consider the 3 teams, if you like the 3 teams other than Mitchell in the night session from a year ago, Washington, I mean, that was a big gap in that semifinal. Mitchell outclassed them pretty handily.
First game was closer in the regular season. Yeah, Mitchell played extremely well.
And then the other two teams, I mean, I would not expect Harrisburg and Brandon Valley to be as good as they were.
Both lost a lot.
Both lost.
You're looking at a Sioux Falls school.
They lost some really, really good players.
Yep.
I guess in Washington, you're looking for another Sioux Falls school to be there. And
it's probably going to be O'Gorman.
Yeah.
So you're just waiting, and I think there's a big gap there. So, yeah, Mitchell Kernel, boys basketball, interested to see the Hoop City Classic matchups.
Just two things for me on the Mitchell boys. I'm just interested to see how are they different. What is maybe a wrinkle or two that we're going to see this year. I'm looking to see, and Landon has tipped me off on this. Is there a bigger role for Gavin Hinker this season? He looks like he lost weight and put on muscle.
I think he could be a real problem for people. Yeah. He's impressed me a lot with what I've seen in the preseason.
And then along those lines, who is a player or two that steps forward and becomes part of the picture, especially since we saw players added at the state tournament or players that came on and had to do little roles. So that's always a story with any high school team. So I'm just interested to see where that comes together. And a word on the girls, since you mentioned them, they have some question marks to fill with so much of their scoring leaving and their presence under the basket, but I expect them to be good with the guard play. Problem is a lot of AA teams have good guards. So where exactly do they come out in this stack? I would expect them to be somewhere between 7 and 10 in terms of seeds, I would think. And if they're better than that, that's great. But this was a team that won 20 games last year. And, if the players that were on this team are able to take another step and come back this year, this could be another really solid season. They've won 30 games under Dave Brooks in 2 seasons, maybe even a little more. So there's been a pattern of them doing a good job year in and year out.
To bring the discussion all together with wins and schedule, Mitchell girls were 15-0, 16-0 last year, and that was a case of, well, how good are they really? They had the number 2 seed, and I don't think anybody thought they were the number 2 team in the state, and there were maybe some people that didn't think they were maybe among the 5 best. And then they lose to Harrisburg in the first round. They finished 6th at the state tournament, and it was probably the case where they were probably 5 or 6. They weren't number 2, they weren't number 3. So it's like, who they play? How are they winning these games? Yeah, you got to look at, well, they're 15-0. Well, they're not really the best team in the state, but you lose Sawyer Stabner. I don't think there was a player in the entire state more important to her team. She did everything, and she did everything well. And without her, it could be a bit of a struggle this year for them. And Mitchell boys, Gavin Sokup's out. That's a pretty big loss. Who's gonna pick up his leadership role? You look at Marcus Talley and Colton Smith for that. Production-wise, you look at Gavin Hinker. You're looking at that third option to score. Parker Mandel had some big minutes last year, late in games. So you look at him as somebody that could probably have more production this year. So, I mean, it's an exciting time for Mitchell basketball. 3 years, looking at 3 years in a row at the state final. And
to Marcus's point, I think there's definitely an opportunity for some of these kids who have played JV, just a couple of them to emerge here. I think certainly we'll see at least a couple of them get some minutes. And, I mean, there's a lot of talent in that whole program right now. I mean, credit to Riker and Coach Neuendorf before him. Like they got some good stuff brewing right now. They're pretty good top to bottom in the development category at the moment.
Just to close the thought, because you're going to start talking about the Hoop City Classic, Mitchell girls, they play Sisseton, who's been a top 5 team in Class A the last couple years. So, and they played Vermilion in the very first game. So we're going to learn at least what kind of team they have right off the bat. And with the boys, they play Orono, Minnesota, a team that's been in the state tournament regularly in Class 3A there, and then Orlando Christian Prep, which I don't know anything about, but I got to think they're good. So I
heard they're pretty highly ranked in their class in Florida.
And then just like last year, you come off that, and you got Harrisburg, Yankton, Huron. Those 3 games will tell you stuff about this team as usual. So, Watertown, Rapid City, Stevens, and Central to start. I don't know about any of those teams. I assume Mitchell's better than all of them. So we'll see what happens. But basketball right here.
A lot of basketball. So wrapping up the football season and heading into a basketball season starts this week here for the Mitchell girls. Landon and Marcus, again, you got SDSU coverage here throughout the month. Where can people go online for all the sports coverage, college, professionals, high school?
MitchellRepublic.com. where you go. So I think I'm headed to Verm for the UC Davis USD game on Saturday. So I'll be interested to see how that all shakes out, and we'll have coverage of all those games and plenty of preview content. Some of it already online, more to come. Landon's calling through the field. Who are the teams to watch? High school basketball. So keep an eye out for that as well.
I think Hamlin's all right.
Boys or girls?
Both. I think
that's the correct answer.
Landon and Marcus and Travis, I'm sure we'll be back here throughout the season in a couple weeks. I think we're going to try and put this on Spotify.
Okay.
We'll be on iTunes for sure. We'll get the Spotify going. So here we go. We'll be back in a couple weeks. Podcast here on KORN.